we have to consider too that, especially if you're going to an elite school, a tier 1 school, which is certainly not that uncommon in the school system we're in, what if your family's financial situation changed? How many families in our neighborhoods now have lost a paycheck or two because of closures? And that puts a whole different complexion.
Well, don't worry. There's $1,200 in the mail. Don't worry. Problem solved.
Maybe by August or September.
Yeah. Geez.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Actually, I have 2 different students, who are seniors who are about to graduate, who have contacted me by email in the last 2 weeks asking for recommendations for scholarship programs because their families were already in a situation where they weren't going to be able to pay, or, they're cutting close. And so these are not scholarships out of luxury. These are sort of scholarships out of need. So of course I, write the letter, do whatever I can. But yeah, I mean, think about how many people's situation, you're right, is going to be different now compared to when they filled out the FAFSA form in, when is that, January, February, something like that? I mean, in the span of just a couple months, that could be a completely different picture. And I would be amazed. I doubt this is the kind of data that will either be collected, or if it is, I doubt it'll be released. I would love to hear about the number of students who bail on their deposits this spring. Yeah. Even if in the end they may still want to go just out of the uncertainty or because the family can't afford it, you just keep the deposit amount, and try again next year. Man, that's tricky. That's really tricky.
Yeah, this is really complex as to what's going on. A lot of moving parts.
I mean, I'm going to ask you to give what do you think is the best advice to a kid in that situation? I mean, without knowing it, without picking a kid in a financial situation, if you had to think, here's something I can say that helps half or more than half of kids, what would you think would be the right way to proceed in the short term?
Oh, I mean, just the general challenge of, are you going to school in the fall?
I mean, yeah.
Start working on contingency plans. I mean, it's tough to think of what they could be, given that we can't move around and that businesses are shut down. So, an obvious thing would be, get a job. And there aren't that many jobs right now. I mean, look at how many millions of people in the labor force across the country filed for unemployment in the past 2 weeks.
10 million.
Yeah. But I think from an emotional, psychological perspective, they should be thinking about what they're going to do, and should think of it as a real possibility, because you'd hate to just kind of coast along until July or August, and then you get that letter saying, hey, guess what? We're doing online. Don't worry. We want you in our class of 2024. And this goes for returning students too. We want you at our school. We're going to do online. Here's how it's going to work. Well, again, if that's not what you were buying into, what are you going to do? And I think there's, you might say, oh, you could consider local community college, but that could be an issue next year, right? Because of budgeting. So you mentioned, and this doesn't necessarily apply to community college, but the four-year schools and grad schools are going to see a huge drop in international students. The thing that's unique about international students is that a significant number of them pay full ride. They subsidize, at the state schools especially, the students that are paid for typically by their tuition, fees, room and board, and tax dollars. But if suddenly you pull away all of that international student funds, that's going to hit the schools quite a bit on their bottom line. But it's not just international students. Endowments. I read somewhere that in 2008 and 2009, even the schools, which aren't all of them by any means, that have significantly large endowments, their endowments are in the form of stocks and equities. They took nearly a 25% hit in the first year of the Great Recession. This could be worse. So even if you're thinking of the elite schools that have humongous endowments, they're going to be, hunkering down a bit.
Which is silly to think, and Harvard and Yale have endowments that, are bigger than the GDP of a lot of countries. Yeah. And, they're literally wealthier than most of the countries in the world. But still, when you see a loss coming, regardless of how much or how little money you have, when you're about to lose some of it, your behavior always changes.
Right.
Yeah. And then what do you think about the schools, that say, especially private schools that don't have an endowment? Like I think, and I was just looking, I can't find the article, but I read an article about how the little bit of thinking or writing that's been done on this subject publicly, it seems to indicate that people are more worried about your private schools, particularly the smaller private schools, because the state will always find a way to prop themselves up, right? But that may not be possible for your smaller private schools. Like you were just pointing out, if they don't have that much of an endowment, what are they going to do?
Well, there's also there's an estimate that about 20% of smaller schools, so let's say under 2,500 students, have been in tough financial straits, as in the past few years. Anyways, you could lose as many as 20% of colleges, because this would be the final straw, the final bullet into the corpse, I guess. So yeah, a lot of and we do have a number of students. We know students, of course, that are choosing smaller schools that aren't rich, but offer, a campus or a classroom experience that they think is valuable, but they could just not be there. And again, that includes students that are returning. Also, state and county budgets are going to contract next year. I mean, certainly we worry about what's going on at the federal level with $2 trillion, another $1 trillion stimulus bills of money that they're just going to have to print up. What's going to happen, though, at the local levels when, let's see, tax revenue from both property tax and income are significantly down over the next year or two, if not longer. So generally, community colleges are not at the top of the list of state budgets. So that's going to be an issue. Also, think about sports. College doesn't start in August or September for them. I think it starts in like July and June. And if you can't get athletes back to school to start training, there goes the fall, football season. And